the thing about Simon is that he's a dentist. He's got a practice on Faulkner Street in Chester. He lives in London. He's been a dentist for some time. He was in the army. He came originally from Oldham, studied at Manchester Grammar School, and went to Manchester University, where he qualified in 1983. Spent some time in the army, opened up a few practices, and has got some very, very novel, interesting, and radical ideas for the way that dentistry should be run in this country. And one of the things which he told me that why he wanted to come on again for the third time, glutton for punishment, our Simon, for the third time, he said that he wants to explore the possibility of how dentistry can actually move forward because of the chances which the COVID has given it, all right, and the opportunities which are now around if we actually seize it properly. So, Simon, it's all yours, and welcome. And if you'd like to unmute yourself, that's brilliant.
Thank you, David. And as I said briefly before most people joined, it's quite difficult to know exactly what level to aim this at. I'm sure some people were on the call when I was last on, so I'm never quite sure what people's knowledge of how NHS dentistry works or how it doesn't work, as the case may be. But clearly, since I was last on, we've had COVID. And basically, my belief is that NHS dentistry is a broken system. It's had problems since the NHS started. NHS dentistry has always been somewhat, and again, this is my personal opinion, I'm happy to chat about it afterwards, is always a little bit of an afterthought. It's never really been mainstream NHS. And as it stands at the moment, the vast majority of general dental practice, which probably you will go and visit on a regular basis, NHS dentistry is a subcontracted item from the NHS to private practitioners. So people like myself, who are dentists with an NHS contract, are technically private practitioners who have just taken a government contract. Our difficulty is that as soon as you attach the three letters NHS to it, it becomes a bit like the Holy Grail, and we're not allowed to do anything nasty about it. But any government contract, whether it's Carillion or anybody else, if it's not worth the paper it's printed on, it's not worth it. And my view would be that generally since 1948, the NHS dental system has been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. Now, when I last left the NHS, which was about 30 years ago, I'd just come out of the military. So as Dave said, I was at Manchester University, did dentistry there, came straight out of dental school and served in the military as a dentist in the military. When there was no pressure on me to do dentistry a certain way, I did it as I was taught to do it at dental school, and the army paid me a salary. So there's no pressure on me to work fast, slow, do a good job, do a bad job. You're expected to do a good job and do dentistry the way you were practiced. After 8 years in the military, I came out into general practice, and I bought what was a mixed practice, so about 50-50, NHS, private, in North London. And after 18 months, realized that I'd lost something like £30,000, which in 1989 was quite a lot of money, because I wasn't prepared to do what was required under an NHS contract to work as fast as I needed to work, or cut the corners that everybody else cut in order to make it work. And therefore I made the decision 30 years ago that I would leave the NHS system and charge my patients what I felt was a reasonable amount of money to do a reasonable job. Now, that's one way of looking at it. The NHS system has continued. And I've always said that peers of mine and a good friend of ours, Pete King, who Dave knows, he went straight from university into the NHS system. The only system he ever knew was the NHS. And as a young dentist, newly qualified, you, dare I say, you're in a system and you have to do whatever the system requires you to do to make it work. And it's a bit like being in an institution, you become institutionalized. And that for every time you go to work, you have to do things a certain way. And eventually it becomes the norm. Now, every year since then, in relative terms, the amount of money that is paid to dentists to do the job has been cut. And the figures will reveal that. But dentists have still made it work. And that effectively means you're on a hamster wheel and you're running very, very quickly. And you have to run quickly to make it work. Unlike the rest of the NHS, where you have salaried staff in buildings and premises, where to an extent no expense is spared. The buildings are there, the equipment's there, the materials are there, you pay the salary and you have to go to work and do it. NHS dentistry is completely different. If I now here in Chester, as Dave says, 4 Street, I had to buy the building. I pay all the running costs of this building. I pay all the staff out of the money the NHS give me. I pay the running costs, I buy the materials, I do everything. And the NHS pay me a certain amount of money per item of treatment that I carry out. So I am literally taking a government contract. But unfortunately, my opinion is that the amount of money the government are prepared to pay is not enough. Now, it doesn't matter which government it is, because the government has changed in the last 30 years, but no one wants to put more money in. And therefore, we've been running a crisis since 1948. Now, in 2006, a new contract came out. I'm not quite sure who was in power at the time, but a new contract came out, which is the current system, which is still in place. So that's 14 years ago, 15 years ago. Have I got my maths right there? Yes, about right. And 2 years after that, a health select committee said it was not fit for purpose. Units of dental activity and a 2006 contract was not fit for purpose. And we still have the same contract 15 years later, because no one else has found the solution to the NHS dental conundrum. What do we do to replace this flawed contract? And no one's been able to do it. The problem being that the government want more for their money and they're not prepared to pay for it. Whichever government of the day it is, they don't want to spend more money. The dental budget, and the last figures I've got, something like dentistry is about £2.7 billion a year. Healthcare in general, at the same time, was 197 billion. So it's a tiny, tiny bit of the contract. They don't want to pay any more. And of that 2.7 billion, the general public are paying 0.7 billion of it. So the government's only stumping up 2 billion of it. Now, it's in crisis, but no one's been able to find a solution. COVID has now come along, which has effectively, or did, decimate NHS dentistry, as anyone who tried to get a dental appointment found out last April, when we were forced to close. Most dental practices believed they could have carried on with the correct PPE, but were forced to close. That's both NHS and private practices were forced to close. That was in the UK. Dental practices throughout the rest of the world carried on treating people with the required PPE and carried on doing things. And there's been no known case of any transmission of COVID within a dental practice. We're always relatively safe to start with, but we were locked down. What the NHS decided at the time is they would continue to pay my rate of money for doing no work. Whereas all the private practitioners, no one did any work and they didn't get any pay. And therefore they were in crisis. But the NHS, the thing about the NHS is they said I had to carry on paying all my staff. That was the one criteria. but they did cut it by 17% because clearly I wasn't using any materials. I wasn't doing lots of things that I was doing before. So they cut it, but I had to keep all the staff, not allowed to furlough staff. In private practices, you were furloughed. Now, after 2 months, they allowed us to start coming back again in a very limited way. And what they effectively did for the next 7 months is they said, what we want you to do, we've thrown out the old UDA system, units of dental activity, the discredited system was thrown out the window. You don't have to do that. So between April and December, they said, what we require you to do is at least 20% of the activity that you did in the previous year. Now, on the face of it, that seems blimmin' heck. You only have to do 20% of what you did, and we're going to pay you what you did before. Well, yes, but what we had to do, we had to spend all our time ringing patients up, doing telephone triage, deciding whether they needed to be seen or not be seen. So the hours and hours and hours that we spent, and clearly we weren't getting a unit of dental activity to that. So we were still doing all the activity, but nothing was being recorded. So we had to do a certain amount up until December. Now, I've got my figures, and so units of dental activity, which they didn't want you to do. So in April and May, we did 0. In June, we did 0.6% of what we did the previous year. Then it goes up to 12%, 25%, 27%, 35% in November was the most we did, because we have to ring people up, get people in. We've had to ventilate all our surgeries, put extractor fans in there, socially distanced, so that clearly the amount of work we do is reduced. And then what happened then, the absurdity then was that 20th of December, I think, was it, when our last lockdown started, 20th of December, Boris said, right, that's it. This is terrible. We thought we were going to get Christmas and New Year. We didn't. On the 20th of December, Boris says, right, close down. 2 days later, NHS England says, you dentists have now got to do 45% of your UDAs for January, February, and March, despite the fact I had not hit any of those targets for the previous 9 months. So everybody else is locking down, and NHS England is saying, you need to do more work. Now, the only way I can do that work is to try and entice people out of their homes to come and see me, to do checkups, because I can't just do emergency treatment because I don't get paid very much for that. And I will not hit my target. They've told me I've got to hit 45%. I'm not going to hit it unless I can persuade people to come out and have routine care, to have their examinations, to have their cleanings done. We're not going to do it. And we've sort of said, how is the rest of the country locking down? And NHS England is saying, come to the dentist, come to the dentist. It's absurd, but they've stuck to it. And it came out 2 days after that criteria. 2 days later, I got a 56-page document from NHS England telling me how I should do it. So clearly, this had been in the planning for months beforehand that they were going to get the dentist to do it. That's by the by. There is a crisis coming on, and I suspect come March time, there'll be people not hitting the target. There could be one argument that NHS England wants some money back. Every year, they claw back money from the NHS budget. And if everybody hits that 45% target, they won't get anything back. The budget has gone up in NHS Dentistry because patients are not paying money. And therefore, their budget has gone up, and there's a crisis. So this is probably the best opportunity we've had since 2006 to rewrite the dental contract. But what we need to try and think about is, what do we think an NHS contract is going to look like going forward? What is everyone's expectation of NHS dentistry? Given that it's been underfunded since the start, what is our expectation? If the budget is limited to 2.7 billion, what do we think it should look like? Should everyone be entitled to a full free NHS system? Well, you haven't had that since 1952. So do we target children, focus totally on children and everybody else has to pay? Do we include in there, clearly we need to look at whether it's the vulnerable groups, people on low incomes, old age pensioners. Are they meant to get a discount? What are we going to devise going forward? Because something has to change. There's a bit of blue sky thinking needed. We need to sweep away the thought process that NHS dentistry is NHS. It is not. From exactly the reason I've mentioned to you guys, we're not funded the same way. We're funded in a way that pays me, and again, the guys were on the call last time, this practice here in Chester is paid £25.18 per unit of dental activity. This dental practice here probably needs to earn something like £150 an hour to survive, to pay the bills, to pay the rent, to pay the staff, to pay the materials. So I've got to be doing a UDA every 10 minutes. 24 hours, not 24 hours a day, 7 days, 5 days a week, 46 weeks of the year, out of the 4 surgeries that we've got here. And that's 10 minutes. So your checkup has got to be 10 minutes. A bit longer than 10 minutes, and I'm losing money, which is why I've got to get you in and out as fast as I can. No niceties, no chatting to you. I've got to do it and get you out. And that is the reality of the system. Now, I will say, and you will have to put your hand up, that there are some dentists who do very well out of the system because they know they play the system and they make it work. Now, that's only a small percentage. Everybody else is trying to make it work. But there are people, you know, do you know a poor dentist? You know, that's the infamous, do you know a poor dentist? But, you know, somebody that's trained for 5 years, do you know a poor doctor? No, but a doctor's paid a salary. And he gets that salary no matter what he does. We're not paid a salary. We're paid £25 UDA, and we have to make it work. And yes, some of my colleagues have made it work because they have to make it work, because you either decide based on that contract, are you going to become bankrupt or are you going to make it work? And that is the dilemma. Any government contract, as we know, big companies do go under having NHS contract, having government contracts. So that's a little bit of the groundwork. I'm more than happy to take some questions, but I would like to have some blue sky thinking. Half the population sees a dentist every year, either once or twice a year. Now that's private and NHS, but half the population go and see the dentist. What else could we possibly be doing for that half of the population that isn't done at the moment to improve the health of the nation? COVID-19 has highlighted anybody with an underlying health problem is, one, more vulnerable for catching COVID-19, and two, much more prone to serious complications. Who in this country is screening the general population? Nobody. Does your GP screen the population? No. Does your GP see half the population every single year? No. GPs see people who are ill or on long-term medication. Generally, dentists and the dental world see people who are generally healthy, who are accustomed to coming for a dental health check and possibly a cleaning, in other words, screening type procedures, and they come twice a year. So who would be better to screen the population than dentists? Now, that is one thing that I've started to do in the practice here in Chester. I totally believe that we need to screen the population. All part of the whole problem of diet and exercise, underlying diabetes, too much glucose. How are we identifying all that? We can do it. And I've started to do it here in Chester because I do believe I want to do the best for my patients. And the best I can do for them is identify health issues early, and so they can be treated early. So underlying heart problems, diabetes, we could get those early by a simple test which takes 8 minutes in this practice. So you come along for a dental health check, I should be screening you. We should be screening the whole population. Nobody else is going to do it. Hospitals are not going to do it. GPs aren't going to do it. So part of a new dental contract, perhaps we can use the dental world to screen the population. And I'll leave it at that and take some questions.
Well, that's really cool. Thank you very much indeed, Simon.